We've left the training room because when you're writing your proposal, you need to spread out. You need to get a nice quiet place, and you really need to be thinking. I mean, let's look at what's gotten us here. You've been out there marketing. You're trying to break this sell, create, deliver cycle. You've made the phone calls. You've sent the articles. You had the appointment. Maybe several rescheduled appointments. Maybe you had 2 or 3 appointments, or you needed to meet some other decision makers with the organization. However it's gotten you there, the bottom line is now we have the information to put together a proposal. This is one of the most critical steps, and you simply cannot shortcut it. Find a quiet place, spread out. You really need to be thinking through all of this information you have, because it's not so much that you've gathered this important information, it's also the sequence in which we sell it to them and the way that we take this elephant and break it down into bite-sized chunks. You've worked way too hard at this point to shortcut this. Spread out. This is a key stage in this entire process. Get the information together, and we want to pull together what we're going to call the formal proposal. That's the document that we want to get executed, that shows the work that we're going to be doing and how the information you've gathered links to your overall solution. Remember, it's about them. The proposal we're going to be building is taking the information that they've given you and bringing it back around to them about them. The cornerstone of your proposal needs to be your executive summary. If done correctly, it leads the buyer back to where the conversation left off and leaves them little or no reason to refuse the proposal. If done correctly, it makes perfect sense, leading them to the solution you're about to provide. A couple of keys with this. It needs to be in their words, which we'll talk a little bit more about it. And the other key is when you get back into presenting the proposal, the important part is bringing that buyer, that decision maker, right back up to where they were when you left. Too often, the biggest mistake we see that's made is that we assume that the buyer knows exactly where they left off. I'd like you to be thinking about this almost as if you're reading a novel that you've left off in the middle 6 months ago. When you pick that novel back up, you don't exactly know everything that went on before that. You have an idea, but you don't have the depth of knowledge that you had while you were currently engaged. That's really important as you think about the decision maker. They gave you this information, they remember the meeting, but they really aren't back in that same emotional state, feeling the pain that they had during your last meeting. Our job is to give them back this information and bring them back up to that point that they were when we left, so we can now move them forward to the solution. We do that by using a tool called the executive summary. Now, when you're creating the executive summary, spread out, get all of your notes there, and categorize them into like compartments. As we've talked about in the note-taking, having an idea of what your thoughts were and what your notes were to yourself as you're moving through the process will be very helpful at this time. Also, knowing what quotes and what things they've said exactly will be very, very useful to you here. The goal is to create bullet points that bring them back to where their train of thought was when you left. The executive summary, we're going to show you a few examples here. The executive summary should point out what they said in their own words or in a very close paraphrase and what the importance of that is. The fact that we're using their words, that we were linking the exact information they gave and we were taking notes, and we're linking that back to our solution, gives you almost instant credibility and shows you are listening, shows that it's about them, not about you, that you're going to solve their issues because you're telling them exactly what it was that they said. The other thing this does is it links to every single style. High D's, it's about them and what they talked about. it satisfies that need. High I's, they realized that the conversation was useful, that we were connecting, and that you took this down personally. High S's, you're not making up a change, you're telling them in their words, you're making it safe because this is their words. And in High C's, it really shows your depth of analysis and that you have the details covered. What you're doing is you're elevating the confidence that you're gaining confidence from these folks, and you're elevating their respect level for you because you've listened clearly to what their needs are. So, document your notes, get them into like categories, and then we're going to create several bullet points that gives back to them in their words what their issues are. Let's take a look at several examples right now. There's a few tips that I want to give you as you present the proposal, as you have this all pulled together. The first is, as much as humanly possible, you need to present this to the folks in person. Right now we're talking about presenting it to an individual decision maker. We've also included here a chapter of a book, Celebrate Selling, that talks about how to give a sales presentation to an entire group, sometimes when you've not even met the folks. That's where the knowledge of the profiles and of the various questioning techniques will come in extraordinarily handy. So take a look at that as well. But for now, let's look at presenting this to an individual. Please, as much as possible, I know sometimes it can be difficult, but try to present it to them in person. That's important to have the impact that you want to have. If that's impossible, or if there are folks who are going to be a part of this in a teleconference or called in from something, one of the tips we like to offer is that the information is sent to them as much as possible, that you can do this as close to the call as you can get. So in other words, we really don't want to ship that proposal out a week in advance or 72 hours in advance if it can be at all helped. I know sometimes there are times that can't work, but if you're doing this over the phone, you want to send this information out as close to the appointment as possible so that it's fresh as you're going through it as well. Then the key is taking them through the executive summary and getting them back to that emotional state, getting them back to all that information that you've gathered up to this point. It may be from the last call, it may be several calls. In the presentation, I'm going to give you a couple of hints here. Take the executive summary, and what you need to be doing is highlighting key words that you can speak to as they're going through the proposal. You know, it's funny. Most sales folks that you've talked to, if you've been in sales your whole life, or if you've bought things before, there's this tendency for the buyer to want to flip to the last page and see what it costs. I'm not telling you that's never going to happen, but I am telling you that the better that you get at this, the less likely that is to happen. Because what you're doing is you're presenting a concert. You're taking your information, you're taking this proposal in their words, and you're speaking it back to them. So highlight a couple of keywords and speak to that. Never, ever, never read it directly. They can read it. That's how we lose them. Everything's working in concert. Your words, what's written down there, your voice inflection, and the other thing is you've taken pages and pages of notes. That's not all captured in the 1 or 2 or 3 sentences for each executive summary point. So, having studied your notes and prepared that allows you to offer a great deal of color commentary to each and every executive summary point. So now there's a lot of information flowing, not just the written word. They can read that. It's the entire concert, your tone of voice, the words you're using, the information from your notes that you're filling in. All of that is working in concert to bring them up to where they were when you left them and they agreed to come back, for you to come back and hear the solution. Now, this is one of the biggest points I can make with this whole thing. Once you've taken them through the executive summary, once you have them in agreement that this is in fact what we talked about, here's the key. It requires your ink pen. At the end of that time, at the end of having taken them through this executive summary, you need to look them in the eye and say, has anything changed since the last time we met? Is there anything else that I've missed here, or you want to make sure that we spend the time on before I take you into the body of the proposal? Is there anything else? Those are the biggest words you can learn. Is there anything else? Then we pick up the ink pen and we hold it to the paper, and should they give us additional points, we write them down with the same fervor that we wrote down the input during the original appointments. That's critical. And the reality is this: if we ask if there's anything else and we do not capture it, we are opening up to them that we're not going to hit what they feel today is a very important point. You will lose the entire impact. So it's not good enough to have done great appointments, written a wonderful executive summary, and brought them up to the end unless we ask, is there anything else? And we put a pen to paper and make sure we capture it so they know that it's going to get addressed. Finally, even if their new point is covered in your proposal, even if it's in there, write it down, let them know that you will address that. Do not ever say, I already have that in there, I'm going to get to that, we've previously talked about that, anything like that. When they said this to you today, you now know this is an important new point in their mind. Even if you have it covered, just simply make sure when you get to that part of the presentation, you link that solution to that answer to, is there anything else? And you will have really, really nailed this, and they will understand that you get it. That's the point. There's a couple of other things that we really need to make sure we have in the proposal. Now the reality is, since you're your own independent person, EX3 Matters, we can't tell you exactly what those solutions are or in what order or how you're going to break them out and deliver them. That's up to you as an independent business person and owning your own consultancy. What we will tell you though is this, that once you've pulled together that executive summary, you can now link your solutions to what they've asked for. So you're not going in as if you are smarter than them or that you have this answer that is a universal answer. What you're doing is linking your solutions to their issues. Once you've highlighted their issues, once they've agreed that that is the case, now it is your job. And frankly, we can't tell you how to do that because you know what your solutions are. You just have to clearly be able to fill in that gap. This is that classic gap analysis, is that this is where they are. You know where you can get them to go. Your solution has to, in their mind, fill that gap. Very, very important. We can help you with that individually. Get on the website, send us questions. Your peers can help you fill that in, but that's the critical part. The other thing is, how do you price this? Again, as an independent business person, we can't tell you what that pricing is. You have to determine what is your rate, what the market will bear, what's the value add to your solution. That's really up to you. But if you look in your workbook, we've given you a template that helps you figure out how you price individual components so that you can add those up into that proposal. We ask you at the end, after you've looked at that, to look at, once you've got those costs covered, what's the value add that you're bringing, and factor that in as a bit of your margin. What they're buying is that top 10, 20% of your brain power. So what's that value in addition to covering your costs? One really, really important point for all EX3 Matters members is this: respect the cost of sale. In other words, it takes a tremendous amount of effort, as we've just been talking about throughout this whole training process. It takes a tremendous amount of effort to find a new client. For example, if you want to earn, and we'll just use round numbers, $100,000, and you're charging, quote unquote, $1,000 a day. And again, we're not selling time for money. But if you had to deliver for 100 days, you'd make $100,000. Remember, that includes the 100 or 150 days that it took to sell those types of engagements. So that you're really not making $1,000 a day, you're making something significantly less than that. My point is this: the network is looking to help out one another. As you've agreed when you joined, is that we're first going to look at our member partners to add on any additional bandwidth we may need or any additional talents we may need. What I'm trying to say is that we need to respect our fellow members' cost of sale. If they've been working on this client, if they've been putting in the time and they can hand you an opportunity to go do some work, remember the cost of that to you is dramatically different than if you've had to spend days and weeks and months closing that sale. The reality is you haven't invested that time, so you should be able to offer a fellow member a significantly different price than if you had found it yourself. You, however, are an independent business person. That's completely up to you. How you charge is completely up to you. We just know from experience that the independent consultants who understand the investment that a fellow consultant has made in that sales process, if they understand that, they tend to get more opportunities than those folks that miss that altogether. Granted, and let's hope that each and every one of us, that our calendars are so full that the supply and demand, out from a time standpoint, there's too much demand on our time and not enough supply, and therefore we can't pass along any lower type of engagement fee because we don't have the time to do it. That would be a wonderful place to be and certainly understandable. In the meantime, respect that cost of sale and you'll also get more opportunities along the way. The final point I'd like to offer is this. Once you've brought somebody up to the with the proposal, once you have taken them through all of that, here's where you need to have laid out your primary and secondary objective, and here is where you have practiced your answer to those objections. Should you hear some objections, should you hear some pushback, if we've followed this process all the way up, not only are we prepared for that, but when we weren't in the heat of battle, we have completed those answers. We do know how to answer that, and now we have every right to ask for the sale. Ask for the sale. Let's get busy. Let's get some sales.